Okay. So let's jump right into this, right? Like we're talking about a potential for like a huge digital exodus.
Yeah, a huge shift.
And it could happen soon.
Yeah, definitely a lot of unknowns.
TikTok might be banned in the US, and it could happen as soon as January 19th. And already people are looking for, a new place to land, And one app in particular is called RedNote. So
RedNote, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to unpack today in this deep dive. What is RedNote all about? Why is it suddenly like the talk of the town? And then, what does this whole situation even mean for the future of social media, right?
Well, I think what's interesting about this whole thing is that this potential ban, right? It's not just about one app. It's kind of a symptom of a larger trend that we're seeing, globally, where there are concerns about data security and especially about apps that have ties to foreign governments.
Yeah, and that's the heart of the issue with TikTok, right? It's parent company ByteDance, which is based in China. The U.S. government's worried about, how user data might be accessed or used, right? Concerned about the potential for things like targeted misinformation campaigns or even like tracking of individuals, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And from what we've seen, TikTok collects an enormous amount of user data, like everything from, your location, your browsing history, all the content you watch. It can even like see the way that you type.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's understandable that people are concerned, right? And the real concern here is that even if ByteDance says, we're not going to do anything nefarious with this data, the concern is that the Chinese government could force them to hand it over.
Wow, that's unsettling.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a little scary. And so, with this deadline looming, users aren't just waiting around to see what happens. They're already making moves, which brings us to RedNote.
Yeah.
RedNote, this app, is huge in China already, valued at over like $17 billion.
That's wild.
But what's really interesting is why it's so successful there.
Right.
It's not just like a TikTok clone, like it's got this kind of unique blend of like Pinterest and Instagram with a strong focus on like highly visual curated content. It's less about dance trends and more about, sharing like aesthetically pleasing things like recipes or travel photos or DIY projects. What do you think about all that?
Well, and that's a crucial distinction, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you're right. A lot of users might initially be drawn to RedNote simply because it fills that like void, the short form video void that TikTok might leave. But I think RedNote's long-term success probably hinges on whether or not it can offer something that is genuinely different. And in China, it seems like they've been very successful by tapping into a desire for a more curated, like inspirational online experience.
Right.
And that might really appeal to US users who are, feeling really overwhelmed by the constant noise of other platforms.
I could definitely see that, but I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
It's like, instead of jumping on the next like viral trend, RedNote's encouraging users to kind of slow down and like appreciate, the beauty of everyday things, like almost like a digital breath of fresh air. It's interesting, but makes me wonder, is this just like a temporary haven for fleeing TikTokers? Or could RedNote really like offer something lasting?
I think that's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
I mean, if RedNote wants to be a real player in the US market, they've got to cultivate that unique identity, right?
Right.
And they can't just appeal to, displaced TikTok users. They've got to appeal to a much broader audience.
Right. So, okay. So just to kind of recap what we've talked about so far, we have a potential TikTok ban, which is driven by national security concerns. We have users seeking refuge in this new app, RedNote. We have like the social media landscape potentially on the verge of like a major shakeup.
Right.
So what does all this mean for you out there listening to this?
Yeah, well, I mean, on a very practical level, if you're a huge TikTok fan, you might want to start exploring RedNote. See if it's something that you enjoy using. But I think beyond that, this whole situation really highlights a couple of things that are, becoming increasingly important. The importance of data privacy.
Right.
And the way that geopolitics, global politics, can actually have a very real impact on our digital lives. That's something that we're going to have to deal with more and more, I think, in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we're seeing a clash, right, between like the desire to have all these like seamless online experiences and the need for, greater control over our personal information.
Absolutely.
And it's complex. It's a very complex landscape, and it does make you wonder, like, what will the future of social media look like, especially if these tensions, keep escalating?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating question, right? Like, are we going to see a more fragmented internet? Are we going to see platforms that are basically divided by national borders?
Right.
Or will we see brand new global players kind of emerge that try to prioritize both user experience and data security? What's that going to look like?
Right. Yeah, it's a lot to think about. So to wrap up our deep dive today, we explored this whole potential TikTok ban. We talked about the rise of RedNote as a possible alternative. And we touched on the broader implications that all of this has for the future of social media. I think the biggest takeaway is that this isn't just about, which app you prefer.
Right.
This is about like the evolving relationship between governments, technology, and individual users like all of us. And I think, ultimately it raises a crucial question for you to think about. In a world where your data is increasingly valuable, but also potentially vulnerable, what steps are you going to take to navigate this complex digital landscape?
It's a good question.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.